Week 10 kicks off tonight between the AFC West division rivals, the Las Vegas Raiders and the Denver Broncos, where the Raiders have had a lot of success in the last 10 matchups, winning 8 games against the Broncos. But the Broncos look to maintain their pace at the top of the NFL and move to their 8th win of the season, moving to 8-2 before a pivotal matchup against the Chiefs. Everybody's here in this video, though, to learn what players you should be starting and sitting this week in fantasy football to move closer to a playoff berth. We're not here to give you some easy options. I'm going to provide you those tough choices that you need in order to have a successful week and smash in week 10. Let's get right into this video here in Blitz Fantasy Football. What's going on, everybody? My name is Blitz Link, and let's get right into the quarterbacks that we're going to want to be starting this week. And we'll start with the hottest quarterback in fantasy football in Jackson Dart. And this is despite not having his two best weapons in Malik Neighbors and Cam Scatterbo right now. He's spreading the ball well between Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Theo Johnson. Now he's got Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary in the backfield. It hasn't really mattered as he scored 21 fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 starts, never dipping below that 19.6 threshold. He's logged at least 55 rushing yards or a touchdown in every single game, including a four straight with a score. So Jackson Dart has that elite rushing upside. And then you pair that with a Chicago Bears matchup where they legitimately are allowing the most yards per play in the NFL. It's a great matchup, and we saw Joe Flacco exploit it not last week. Jared Goff's our next one, and Goff has been a little bit up and down at times, and he's very dependent on a matchup. And this week, he has a great one in the Washington Commanders. Over the past few weeks, he scored at least 20.8 points in 2 straight road games against the Bengals and the Chiefs. He can deliver outside of Detroit right now, and he obviously has a plethora of weapons to do so. And the Commanders have allowed the 3rd most points to fantasy quarterbacks this year. The Detroit Lions are in for a great matchup against the Commanders, and Jared Goff is a player that I have a hard time benching this week. He's right inside my top 12 quarterbacks, sitting as my quarterback 10 entering week 10. The last guy is Matthew Stafford. 2 straight quarterbacks that don't have a lot of rushing upside, but when they have the volume, they are great. Stafford has been really good. His touchdown numbers are off the charts. He has Devontae Adams, who leads the league in red zone touches. You have Puka Nacua, who just came back, and Stafford in this offense has been putting up some elite numbers. He ranks first in both passing touchdowns and hero throw rate, which are 2 significant metrics that showcase how good he's been this year. The 49ers defense has not been as good of late, allowing a ton of scoring from opposing quarterbacks while also generating the least amount of pressure in the NFL. So it is a great matchup for Stafford and company to continue their hot streak, and maybe Matthew Stafford wins himself an MVP this year. Quarterbacks I'm sitting, let's start with Justin Fields for the New York Jets. And Fields has been a very matchup dependent fantasy option this year. He's had multiple performances where he just hasn't necessarily shown up at all. And over his past 3 games, he's only totaled 335 passing yards in 3 starts with just 1 passing touchdown. His rushing upside remains the saving grace. He's run for 84 yards on 22 carries during that stretch, but he's just not been very good. And when he faces a tough matchup like he's going to in the Cleveland Browns, who have been very tough on opposing offenses throughout the entire year, and quarterbacks have not been producing, it's going to be brutal for Justin Fields and company, especially if Garrett Wilson misses this one. The next quarterback I am sitting, it is Jordan Love for the Green Bay Packers, who is maybe the most inconsistent quarterback in the NFL right now. He ranks 8th in yards per attempt and 7th in passer rating, but it doesn't really matter. Like last week against Carolina, just not doing much. And he's top 17 fantasy points just once in his last 4 games. Now he gets the Philadelphia Eagles, who have been really strong against quarterbacks this year. He doesn't have Tucker Kraft. It's easy to sit Jordan Love this week and find a better option outside of him. Trevor Lawrence is our next one here. And Lawrence has flashed a little bit more consistent play as of late, especially last week against Las Vegas, where he had a big day and a big time win against them. He's missing Travis Hunter. Looks like he'll be missing BTJ this week, and he's also struggled this year. He ranks 30th in yards per attempt and 32nd in highly accurate throw rate. This week, he gets the Houston Texans, who have blanketed opposing quarterbacks the entire year. They've allowed the fewest passing yards per game and the 4th fewest yards per attempt since week 5. So Houston, not a matchup I like Trevor Lawrence in. You definitely need to be sitting him this week. Let's get into the running back position. Let's start with Jaylen Warren for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a player that I am targeting in trades as much as possible. He has such an easy schedule. He's the RB17 right now in fantasy football, and his elite metrics are he ranks 9th in missed tackle rate and 14th in yards after contact. among 62 other running backs. Over his last 3 games, Warren has taken 79% of the snaps, and he's also had 13 points in 5 of his last 7 games. Everything is trending for Jalen Warren to be a consistent option. Now he has the schedule on top of that. And this week he gets the Los Angeles Chargers, who allow the second highest explosive run rate this year and the fourth highest yards after contact. So the Chargers, it's going to allow Warren to definitely have that ground volume, and he's also going to get the receiving volume that we know he has on a weekly basis. The next guy that has been very touchdown dependent, not volume dependent this year, it's David Montgomery for the Detroit Lions. And, he hasn't been flashy in fantasy football, but the numbers are still respectable. He has over 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's at least 11 carries in 6 of 8 games. But when he doesn't reach the end zone, it's not ideal by any means because Montgomery finishes under 10 points, and it's not very great in fantasy football. This week, I do think he finds the end zone against the Washington Commanders, who have been struggling the past few weeks. They're without their star quarterback now. Terry McLaurin's banged up. This could be a blowout game. And I think that David Montgomery finds the end zone in that one. So it makes him a strong RB2 entering the week. The next guy is Kyle Monungai. And this is regardless of if DeAndre Swift plays or not. I do think he is viable either way. We just watched this guy have 29 touches for 198 total yards against the Bengals. And, DeAndre Swift has had his ups and downs throughout his career. Ben Johnson didn't like him and let him leave Detroit at one point. Like, Kyle Monungai has slowly increased his workload, and then he has that breakout game. 2 straight games over 17 points where he received double-digit carries. This week, they face the Giants, who have been gashed on the ground, allowing the second most rushing yards and fantasy points to opposing running backs. Kyle Monungai, man, he's in for another great week, and I absolutely love finding a way to get him in my starting lineup. Running backs that I'm sitting, Rashad White, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's just not been very good filling in for Bucky Irving. He's only totaling 66 yards per game with a 1.3% explosive run rate and a 1.7 yards after contact mark. Before the bye week, we saw Sean Tucker get more involved in this offense, and it could be a bigger sign of what's to come. Rashad White playing more or less snaps on early downs, and he plays more on third downs. And then this week, he gets the Patriots, who have blanketed opposing running backs the entire year, allowing 3.1 yards per carry, only 2 rushing touchdowns. And if White can't have a few catches, it's going to be a bad day, and I would not want that in my starting lineup against a tough Patriots defense. The next guy is Travis Etienne. And while there's some part of the fantasy community that thinks Bashal Tutin's taking over, Etienne led all players in usage rating last week, totaling 25 touches in that massive game last week, which was a crazy one between the Raiders. Let's just say that he's averaging 89 total yards per game, but he only sits at that 50% snap share. This week, though, he gets the Houston Texans. And as you guys know, the Texans absolutely shut down opposing offenses. They rank second in rushing yards allowed per game. Travis Etienne, he seems like he's in for a bad day against a tough Houston Texans team. And then the final guy that may be the biggest disappointment off the waiver wire this year is Tyrone Tracy Jr., who got outsnapped by Devin Singletary last week and lost out on early down and short yardage work to the veteran running back, where Tracy mainly operated on that third down role. He's averaged just 2.08 yards after contact per attempt and has broken very few tackles this year. This week against a Bears defense that has actually been solid against the run as of late. They've allowed the 11th fewest rushing yards since week 5, and they rank first in the NFL in yards after contact allowed over that stretch. So they've been getting better as a run defense. Tracy is not going to be in for a very good day against that Chicago defense. Let's get into the receivers, and it is a Chicago Bear that starts off this list, and it's Mr. Donut himself, Rome Odunze, who's coming off a 0-point performance last week, has been very inconsistent. 3 of his last 4 games have been bad outings. He had a good game against Baltimore where he topped 20 points, had over 100 yards. Besides that, not great. And he's had a 22% target share this season with a 1.86 yards per route run, while also leading the team in deep targets. I think the panic on Rome Odunze is a little bit too high. This seems like the matchup to get right against the New York Giants, where they have allowed the 7th most fantasy points per game, 2 wideouts, and the 4th most receiving yards to perimeter receivers. Rome Odunze, guys, is in for a nice week. Make sure he's in your lineup despite his inconsistencies. Let's talk about consistent, and that is Khalil Shakir, basically a lock for 11-plus fantasy points, and I mentioned that. Now he's not going to do that, but 6 of his 8 games have reached that mark. He's been much better as of late, nearly 50-yard receiving per game, 2.06 yards per route run, and he gets a Miami defense who allowed the 10th most PPR points per target and the 7th highest passer rating to slot receivers since week 5. Shakir's already scored 14.5 points against this defense. I think that there's anybody outside of Dalton Kincaid in this passing game that I want, it is Khalil Shakir. And then the next guy is Wan'Dale Robinson, the other side of that Bears matchup that I want to target. Robinson has filled in great for the injured Malik Neighbors, taking over a 25% target share since Jackson Dart became the starting quarterback last week. Had a ton of catches, not too many yards, but still held up in PPR formats. And the thing with him is he's always had the volume. It's just the yards down the field that he always hasn't been super consistent with. This week, he'll get those yards. The Bears have surrendered the third most PPR points to slot receivers and the second most touchdowns to all wide receivers. Wan'Dale Robinson is going to absolutely have a monster week against the Bears in a projected shootout. Wide receivers, I'm sitting DK Metcalf. It has just been a whirlwind of a year for Metcalf. He's been held under 60 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. And when he's not scoring a touchdown, he hasn't been that good. As far as his metrics go, 19.6% target share, leads the team in both red zone and deep targets, but it's just not great. He's only seeing 5.9 targets per game. Now he gets the Los Angeles Chargers, who have been miserable for opposing wide receivers, allowing the third fewest fantasy points to the position and just 1 touchdown to perimeter receivers the entire year. It feels like a bad matchup for Metcalf paired with not enough volume. He's going to be in for a bad week this week in fantasy. The next guy is Jordan Addison, who has been trending in the wrong direction as of late, and especially with JJ McCarthy back at the quarterback position. Just not good. Fewer than 50 yards in each of his last 2 outings. He's been limited to 4 targets or less during that stretch. With JJ McCarthy at the quarterback, he hasn't topped 25 passing attempts in a game this year, which is not super encouraging for this passing game outside of Justin Jefferson. And then he gets the Baltimore Ravens this week, who have been much better as of late, and they only have allowed the 8th most receiving yards to perimeter receivers since week 5. And we know a majority of that is going to be heading to Justin Jefferson. Expect Jordan Addison to not have the volume this week to produce in fantasy football. The next guy is Chris Olave. And while Chris Olave, I love him. I think he's a great football player. Not a great week, and Tyler Shuck does not play to his strengths. He's averaged over 62 receiving yards per game, but has an elite 26% target share, 30.3% first read share. But it's been Tyler Shuck who's been checking the ball down a lot, not pushing the ball down the field, that has hurt his numbers in the past few weeks. Now he gets Carolina, who has kind of had his number over the years. He's been limited to 60 yards or fewer in 4 of his last 5 games against them. He's been failing to score double digits in 2 straight, let alone this is the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing receivers this season. So the Panthers' tough matchup. Chris Olave, can't find a way to get him in my starting lineup this week. The tight end position. Let's get to Kyle Pitts in Atlanta, who is a consistent option at the tight end position. I know last week was a down week, but man, this guy's been a beast. He's led the team in targets over the last 3 weeks. He's averaging 9 per contest during that stretch. He's had 47 receiving yards per game with 1.49 yards per route run. And this week is a great opportunity for him to build on that success, as the Colts have been one of the more generous defenses to tight ends, ranking 3rd in fantasy points allowed, 2nd most in catches to the position. This Atlanta team, who came very close to beating the Patriots last week, is going to be looking to pull off an upset with their season on the line. I like Kyle Pitts. Think he'll be in for a nice day. The next guy is Dalton Schultz for the Houston Texans. And I know no CJ Stroud is a little bit concerning, but Davis Mills filled in nicely, and Schultz had 77 yards against a very tough Denver Broncos defense. He's averaging 48 yards per game and a 17% target share this year, which is nothing to slouch at for sure. The Jaguars this year to tight ends have allowed the 2nd most receiving yards and points to position, giving up double-digit fantasy points in 5 straight contests to tight ends. Dalton Schultz is going to make that 6 on Sunday. Theo Johnson is our last must-start tight end, and he has been a red zone monster. He's accumulated 6 targets in the red zone, and he has 5 touchdowns in his last 6 outings. Really, really good numbers, 21.2% target share since Jackson Dart took over. The Chicago Bears are brutal across the middle of the field. As I mentioned, with Wan'Dale Robinson, it feels like Theo Johnson or Wan'Dale are going to have a monster game in this one, and maybe even both will have great days. As far as tight ends, I'm sitting the first one, Luke Musgrave. I don't understand the hype between Luke Musgrave absolutely filling into that Tucker Kraft role. It will not be happening. Musgrave's route participation only this year has been 23%. He's sitting at a 16% target per route run mark, which is not very impressive at all. This week they get Philadelphia, which has been really good against tight ends, allowing the 3rd fewest receiving yards and fantasy points per game to the tight end position this season. If you want to hold on to him, I'm fine with it, but just don't start him in week 10 because it's a tough matchup and you will not get rewarded. Zach Ertz is our next one, who has been a very touchdown-dependent tight end this year. We have no more Jaden Daniels, which hurts his volume, with Marcus Mariota limiting his catches and yards. when he's been the starting quarterback this year. He's failed to top 7 points in each of his last 3 games with Mariota at quarterback. Detroit's defense is the seventh fewest tight end points allowed. Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch, those guys are elite back there. They are limiting tight ends every week. Just not a good matchup for Zach Ertz. The next guy is TJ Hawkinson for the Minnesota Vikings. And while he did catch a touchdown last week, he is only averaging 13 yards per game with JJ McCarthy as his quarterback with that lone touchdown coming last week. It's just not been good. This offense has prioritized the running backs more in the passing game underneath. Hawkinson has been the least beneficiary of that. And like I said, McCarthy has yet to top 25 passing attempts in a game. Not great this week. And, TJ Hawkinson's going against Baltimore. This is about the 10th fewest adjusted fantasy points per game to the tight end position this year. Not ideal by any means. Let's get into those defenses that I'm looking at this week. And there's a few that I like. The Cleveland Browns against the New York Jets. The Browns have just been good. Myles Garrett, elite player. Their run defense is going to be able to slow down Breece Hall. I'm not in on Justin Fields, but I'm in on that Browns defense. The Bills are my next one against the Miami Dolphins. Second in pressure rate, which is so encouraging for Buffalo heading into the playoffs this year. Tua has been a turnover machine, and who knows, he may even get benched at some point this week. Buffalo's in for a great week. Carolina's another one I'm looking at. The Saints with Tyler Shuck, 3 turnovers last week, only averaging 15.3 points per game. This is a great matchup to start that Carolina defense that's been underrated this year. Defenses I'm sitting, the Packers against the Eagles, they don't turn it over. They don't get sacked. They're still scoring a ton of points. Not a great matchup for any defense in general. And the Packers might just be a little bit overrated on the defensive side of the ball. And then the Atlanta Falcons, the other defense I'm sitting. You got to sit a defense against the Colts where they're averaging 32.2 points per game. And I know they turned the ball over last week, got a lot against Pittsburgh, but that's not a reason to start them this week. And then kickers to start. Jason Myers, who has been on fire as of late, did really well against the Cardinals earlier this year. We'll look to cash in on that again. And then Cairo Santos for the Bears. The Bears are elite, 68 points for their kickers over the last 5 games. Cairo Santos should be able to cash in very nicely. As far as kickers, I'm sitting Mr. Record Breaker himself, Cam Little, 68-yard field goal. This Jaguars offense just has not been settling for field goals enough, and Little's been very inconsistent. Now they get the Texans, tough matchup there. Then the other one's Josh McCarty. The Rams brought in competition for him. He's already missed 5 field goals. 49ers have been very good at limiting opposing field goals, while the Rams have been very opportunistic with touchdowns. I'm fading him this week. All in all, though, that is the Week 10 start and sit guy. Make sure you tune in Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, where we get that live start and sit fantasy football Q&A video reminders for the end of that video for y'all. Drop a comment down below if you need any immediate advice, and make sure you hit that subscribe button for more Blitz Sports Media content, and I'll catch you guys next time.